Hey, everybody. Welcome to FiveStack, the Friday edition. It's so good to be with you. Can't believe it's been a week of crazy, crazy stories, unbelievable stories, nonstop news. And I'm so glad to wrap it all up with me. The end of this week is Olga Lautman, the creator and brilliant everything about unmasking Russia and the Trump tyranny tracker, which I adore and love and is one of the most useful resources I've ever had. Olga, thank you for being here on a Friday. Nice to see you.
Ugh, I cannot believe this has been a week. I mean, it feels like a decade
I mean, it really has
that I
been a
saw.
week.
It feels like I saw you a decade ago, and
I
that's
know
rough,
because there's so
right?
much that happens in between, and you got so much focus, and then the story of the tariffs in itself is such a massive story, and uh, I'm going to get there in a second, but I just want everyone to gather, so I'm going to just spend a little time telling people about a couple of housekeeping things. But first thing, if a lot of people are saying the 5:30 maybe is not the best time for them to catch the show live, but they're dying to see the show every day or be part of the show. So if you guys have better suggestions of what time might be work for you, I'll work with Olga and Dean and see what we can do in terms of getting a better time so more people can watch live. We're really excited about all the number of people who are watching the show and live or in its recorded form afterwards. It's really great that people are taking such an interest and supporting us. So thank you very much. In fact, if you want to right now, you can just restack us or whatever it is that you do here on this on Substack. Just restack this live show and see if we can get even more people to join us live, so we can have a nice full conversation at the end of this incredibly busy week. Let me just fix this thing on my ear. So we've got
Week
the
from
top
hell.
five stories of the week, and the number five story of the week is also really the number one story of the week because it's impossible to ignore the tariffs. We have to start there. $6.4 trillion in value has been wiped out because the president of the United States, in his wisdom, decided to launch a trade war with everybody in the world all at exactly one time, and they're not quite responding in the way he's expecting them to. So now we're all out $6.4 trillion, and no one is quite sure how we're going to put this mess back together again, if it is even possible to put it back together again. I want to get Olga's thoughts on this, but I have some other thoughts later on about what he's really trying to do and why he's doing what he's doing right now. But Olga, what a mess. What a real, real mess. You could not imagine a bigger foreign policy or trading or economy mistake than this one that he did.
I mean, as I see these numbers go down, and I see, him not really giving a shit about
He's on the
what is
golf course today.
happening.
He's on the golf
Yeah,
course.
yesterday too.
It's
Yesterday, I mean,
unbelievable.
all the markets are red. He's running to hang out with the Saudis at a
Oh yeah,
golf
yeah. Yesterday was
course.
a charity dinner with the Saudis
Yes.
around golf, but today he's just playing golf because it's Friday afternoon and this is what he does. The tone deafness of it all, the absolute inability to imagine what it must be like for people to see their 401ks with hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, wiped off those of their retirement savings they've worked for all their lives, and he just doesn't care. He's
He
like, oh,
doesn't.
the patient's having an operation.
And
You know,
and I keep, as everything is bleeding literally on Wall Street. And again, obviously not everyone is tapped into Wall Street or has retirement savings, but Wall Street is like a thermometer. It's
yeah.
telling you, that there's an underlying condition or conditions. And this is all going to translate into the real street when, companies have to start cutting jobs. And then even if you don't have a 401k, suddenly you're going to be unemployed. But with all of this, I keep thinking, like, every campaign, his favorite thing was, I am your retribution. And he is in power as the most powerful man in the world. And he literally is taking revenge against America, trying to destroy it every which way to leave us like in the ashes and trying to destroy the world. I mean, this is all I keep thinking because nothing else is logical.
But he certainly
And
is trying to destroy America. I mean, I will go very, very much in agreement with you on that. That this man has got a mission, and his people have
mhm,
got a mission, and their mission seems to be to destroy America because you can't really understand it any other way. There's no other
no,
reason for a person like any person to make these moves that he's making in the way he's making them. I mean, you could try justify it in the way he's trying to justify it, that he's sort of, renegotiating the debt or all this other
no,
kind of
he's
stuff that he's
not.
doing. But we know this guy.
With
This
who?
guy's
Penguins?
the
Penguins?
penguins.
Who is he renegotiating the
Well,
debt
there is
with?
$250 billion of debt that's becoming mature, and it's a big concern for people because what are we going to do with that? So
Yeah.
maybe if you devalue the dollar and you start a reshoring project, maybe you can get favorable deals, but you can't do those things. I mean, firstly, the numbers he has based his entire equation on do not exist in the trading world. I mean, this is like he took the deficits and then he divided it by the exports and came up with this number, this magical number, and then divided that in half to come up with a reciprocal, so-called reciprocal tariff. But that's not
And
really a reciprocal
penguins.
tariff on penguins. It's
And
not-
and on our military base, he put tariffs on territory where the only thing that exists in that territory is our military base. So he's
it's
tariffing
funny.
on our military base, penguins. No, but in all seriousness, look, clearly, if you put everything together, he is destroying the economy,
Mhm,
doing everything he can. You know, tariffs, you can argue, can be useful if they are done strategically
mhm.
and whatnot. But this is blanket just bullshit. Like, let me attack the world and start a war. He is gutting our federal government. He's chasing away every single top scientist and dismantling every science program, every anything, like the whole health and human services is being dismantled. They
That's shocking.
dismantled the unit that is dealing with the bird flu. I mean,
Mm.
you know what I mean? So there, he's destroying the government. He's dismantling everything. He's firing people. He is attacking the world basically with these tariffs that don't even make sense of the way he presented it on with these fake charts. You know, and at the same time, he is abandoning and attacking our allies.
Mhm.
I mean, he's threatening to invade Canada, threatening to invade Greenland. Apparently, they really are in
They really are.
discussions
They really are going to.
of
That's their plan.
invading. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, this is, you know, I brought it up many times on this show. You know, he is putting us in a situation. Not only is he has he launched an economic war, but he could at a point be where he will have American military fighting the British and the French and other European countries.
Fighting
I
Putin's
mean,
war for him. Basically, this is fighting Putin's war, and we know how Putin fights wars. Look, it's absolutely distressing what he's done. As an aside, by the way, that list of nations, it looks to everybody like he actually got like a for GPT kind of program, an LLM, to actually come up with that tariff list that he showed everyone because of the way the countries are listed, because the Penguin Island is there. They figured out that they actually got a LLM to do it because those islands shouldn't have really been there. So that's how there's a number of people saying this is just basically artificial intelligence that they just put in, hey, we need tariffs, and out came these tariffs. But more importantly than that, there is, as I've been thinking about this, like, why would anyone do this? Why would anyone walk into, if you're the president of the United States, why would you walk into a disaster like this, where you knowingly are going to trash the stock market, the thing that you've spent your whole business career living for? This is the thing he loves the most. And so you got to understand that he's either doing it because, okay, there's some financial reward that comes out of this. And what is the financial reward? If you look at this situation from a we know he's very close to China. We know he's very close to Russia. We know that the real actual money that Trump gets is from China, not Russia. But the influence and the control comes from Russia, although a lot of money does as well. But so you look at it from their perspective. The Chinese have been trying to gain equity with the same way that the dollar is the dominant currency in the world. They want the renminbi to be as powerful as the dollar because that's their international goal. They want to rise up as a superpower. In order to do that, they need people to sort of back off the US dollar. And so the only thing I can see as a reason for this is what they're doing is that they're intentionally forcing all these countries when they have surpluses of US dollars, they keep it because they need the US dollars. It's a reserve. They can buy commodities, they can buy oil, they can do all this crazy stuff with it. And the way he's figured out these tariffs is calculated in a way that he's forcing these countries to reduce their surplus of US dollars and then basically zero out, so then the tariffs could be zero. He did this with Vietnam this morning, is what he says. If that's the case, what I think he's doing is he's getting all these countries like Vietnam, which holds a lot of dollars, to ditch their dollars onto the open market and replace it with their renminbi because that's an equally kind of sound reserve. And what that means, what that will do is really create runaway inflation because you have way, way, way more dollars suddenly in the marketplace than we've ever had. The value of the dollar is going to sink. It's great for the Chinese. They would love this because, hey, they are finally going to have greater status in the world. The US dollar becomes not as important, and they'll be able to replace, especially in these Pacific Asian countries, they'll be able to replace the US dollar in their reserves. And that is, I think, what his goal is, because he's not doing it for the United States. His
No,
interest
no.
is not in the United States. His interest is not in your pocketbook or anyone's pocketbook, maybe his own. He's doing it so he can enact these tax cuts for the rich and so he can get something for the Chinese. And I think this is what the Chinese are wanting to get from him is more of their currency used as a reserve. And that to me, well, that makes a lot more sense because otherwise, why on earth would you do this crazy thing where you're tanking the entire market? Only problem is this very like this not very sophisticated plan obviously is not working because the world is not biting. At the end of the day, if the world was only Vietnam called him up today and made a deal, no other countries called him up and
And
made a
we don't
deal.
even know if they did make a
Yeah,
deal.
it's
I
true. We don't
mean,
know.
really, he comes out and bullshits about
Right.
everything. So we don't even know if he made a deal. There are many times that,
He just says
oh,
things.
I had this discussion, with Canada, and they told me this, this, and this. And then the Canadians come out and like, no, that didn't happen.
Very
So,
good
I
point.
mean,
Yes.
so
It
we
could be
don't
nothing.
even, yeah, it could be nothing. And frankly, I mean, look, if this was the only thing that he did, then
Mm,
you know what? Maybe the world would be and have more of an appetite to make a deal.
mm,
But you have to take this in context to the betrayal of Ukraine, to abandoning European allies and frankly attacking them, verbally and with threats of invasion. And now doing this. Who is going to sit and wait for America? America is done. I hate to say it. America is done. I mean, our reputation, our trust, everything is finished. And it's not going to end if when Trump leaves. I've said it before and I'll keep repeating. This division and this, like what he has done to our most key alliances is so deep
yeah, it's very hard to
that
fix.
it will take several election cycles for people to understand that what America can be trustworthy. Not that this back and forth, I call it ping pong diplomacy.
Hmm.
Today it's Trump. NATO is irrelevant. Europe is irrelevant. I want to be close with Russia. Tomorrow it's Biden. NATO is the best. This is the best alliance, and we have to strengthen it. Then Trump, no, NATO is non existent. You cannot have this every four,
No.
8 years
Y-
because countries have to protect their own citizens and they need a foreign policy guarantees in order to plan out a decade, 15 years ahead. So, I
mhm,
mean, what he had done is, create such a rift and irrelevance for America, which really is heartbreaking.
mhm.
But this is going to cause the rest of the world to just redo their trading alliance.
Yeah, and
I
they're doing
mean,
it right now.
I-
They're doing it
you,
right
uh,
now.
I tell you, Trump really, he is, good at something. I never thought that I would see the Japanese, South Koreans, and Chinese getting together.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, these things.
Centuries of animosity and hatred and wars. And it's like, let's get together because we need to prepare against the tariffs. And this wasn't about tariffs, even though, they're doing it on face for tariffs. Japan and South Korea, no, they can't rely on Trump. What
Yeah.
happens if North Korea does something? You think Trump is going to come running to protect South Korea or Japan? China will. China can make a phone call to North Korea and tell them to back off. So he basically has taken us out of the equation and invited, China, Russia, and other adversaries to fill the vacuum everywhere with financial agreements, with alliances, with everything.
I want to go. This so well said, and I want to go back to what you said earlier on about what America's like ping pong presidencies, sort of they
That's what it is.
like. You can't keep doing this. America's got to understand that they have responsibilities as citizens of the world as well. They can't switch alliances like they do girlfriends and boyfriends. I mean, this is not the way it works. We have alliances that are tested over centuries, and it's really important to keep those alliances together because you know what, you keep alliances with the countries like Canada are really good for America, really good for America. You don't want to fight with your neighbor. Why do you want to fight with your neighbor? And so we keep under, it's so obvious now that what America needs to realize is the choices they're making are hurting themselves. And in some ways, that has come home to roost this week, and they've seen these dramatic losses in the Dow, and in the other markets. We've seen how much it's going to hurt people, and it's really going to hurt people. I mean, there's no
It
doubt
is.
about it. This is going to
It's
hurt.
very heartbreaking, but
Yeah,
you know what? Americans put Trump in.
yeah,
Even if it's half of the country, if you're in another part of the world, you're not looking at how many people voted for Trump versus Harris. You're just saying Americans reelected him.
yeah,
So they put him in, and now they're going to get hurt. I mean, this is the pain, and we haven't even begun
the
to see
ending.
the pain.
Right, because
But
just to point out, the reciprocal sanctions, like Chinese ones that came in today, they just announced them today. We haven't started seeing what that's really going to start looking like.
we
Uh,
haven't seen Trump tweet at 3 a.m. from a toilet bowl that he's enacting another
yeah, true.
35% back
Which you
at
will.
China,
You
and
will,
then
right?
they will come back with another response. That's what trade wars are,
Yeah. I mean, this is
you
what
know.
he's started. And look, we need relations with the world. We need good relations with the world. And everything that they've done since they took power has been to damage those relations with the world. Every single action they've taken and with their own people. And the fact that there are still Republicans in this country that are sitting around saying he's doing what he promised, he's not doing what he promised. He didn't promise a war with Canada. He didn't promise a tanking of the U.S. stock market of $6.4 trillion of losses. He didn't promise any of that. He didn't say he was going to take away Meals for Wheels. He didn't say he was going to take away the pandemics office. He didn't say he was taking away NIH and CDC and Department of Education. No, he did say Department of Education. I will give him that. But more than that, he did not say he was going to send his friend Elon Musk in and tear apart Social Security. They did, and yet he's doing that. So it's just really disgraceful. And we keep saying it over and over again. I just this week
And we're
really,
day 75, not to interrupt. This
wow.
is day 75.
But it's the most successful 100 days of any presidency. He
All
actually
right, for
tweeted that,
Russia.
yeah, for Russia, for the Russian president. Yes, it is. So that's story number five, and we'll probably get back to tariffs a little bit later on. Story number four is,
I I just want to
yeah,
add to go
yeah,
back to
yeah, yeah,
story
for
number
sure.
five
Yeah,
to wrap that up.
yeah,
I have seen every single pundit carry on about the 1987, and since 1987 Trump was attacking Japan and blah 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 and whatever. Um I have written about this 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and I've repeated it over and over. Trump started attacking Japan when he came back from the Soviet Union.
right. When they first
He
started,
took those ads out, and the KGB saw this as a successful operation. So
right,
this is not Trump just some freaking playboy real estate guy running around Manhattan, decided to wake up and say, let me go attack Japan and their policies. This came from the Soviet Union. He
mm,
was fed these talking points.
of course,
And this is what people on TV, because I have seen several segments of everyone saying, "Wow, this is some one thing he's never changed." He changes here and there, but this he's never changed since 1987, without providing the context that when the reason he had these is when he came back from the Soviet Union and when he had the Soviets in his orbit plus Ivana, his ex-wife, who was Czechoslovakian under a communist country under the control of the Soviet Union, their satellite.
Whose
I mean,
father
this
was
didn't.
considered
He
a
was an
spy.
inform. He
Yeah,
was an
yeah,
informant. She was an informant.
mm,
It was listed in those files that were how you call opened up, because
yeah.
every single satellite country and the country under control of Soviet Union, Ukraine, opened up the KGB archives, which were very heartbreaking.
Mm,
Um, so this files were opened up, and it clearly lists from the date of when the notes are taken of her providing information on the U.S. political climate. Her husband. They had that she had a prenup with him, that they were going to have 3 kids. So I mean, there were full details
mm.
on this. So I just wanted to bring that up because
Yeah,
the
because
media
yeah.
is completely obsessed with this 1987 without realizing that this happened after he came back from the Soviet Union,
That's a very good point. Look, the media has blind spots about Trump everywhere. And I mean, just the fact that they haven't even explained why he's doing these tariffs. They keep talking about,
especially Russia.
yeah. And like Russia's not even included in this list of tariffs, which is kind of
No.
crazy. Obviously, to us, we understand why. But, and we should talk a little bit about all these other things that happened this week. But that point you're making is so important. And it's like everything that I don't know whether they have blinders on or whether they have been told not to do it or whether there's censors in their newsrooms or why do they feel like they have to avoid all these very important facts that really give context to so much of the stories that are happening in the day in and day out. I have no idea. It blows my mind. Good point though. So story number 4 then. Let's do Dmitriev because it really does tie in to what we've just been talking about Russia. So Kiril Dmitriev, who is one of the architects of the 2016 election of Donald Trump, installation of Donald Trump into the White House, was sanctioned because of that. It wasn't allowed to come back to the United States. Only he showed up this week. Tell us about it.
So, just to correct a little, he was sanctioned after the 2022 invasion
Okay.
because he runs Russia's sovereign wealth fund. So, Kirill Dmitriev is an operative, very high level, very close to Putin and trusted. I call him a money bags. He's the one who moves money,
His
one
money
of the
bags.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the one because Putin has several. A few of them got sanctioned, even prior, after 2014, to move money around the globe, to move money for operations, terrorist attacks. I mean, they have routes and messengers and bagmen roaming around everywhere under the guise of, businessmen. Um, so Dmitriev is very close to the Kremlin, so close that his wife went to school with Putin's daughter. This
Oh
is
wow.
why he's even a who's who in Russia. Trust me, if he married a different woman, he'd be nobody. Um, so he was involved in 2016 as a messenger.
Mhm.
Um, and just to give a little brief recap, in 2016, after Trump won the election, Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn went to have a meeting with the Soviet Russian ambassador Kiselyak. So
Mhm.
they had a meeting with him. Kushner had the genius idea of creating a back channel to the Russian embassy to avoid U.S. intelligence detection. Michael Flynn at that meeting had a genius idea of having a meeting in a third country that will not fall under U.S. intelligence. So a few weeks later, we had Seychelles meeting that January of 2017. Eric Prince was the representative
Right.
for the United States. Dmitriev was the representative for
The Russians.
Russia, and then you had this guy George Nader, who
Yeah.
was
It's representing the
indicted.
UAE and Israel in Israel quietly, but
Yeah.
UAE, he's the porn well, not the porn guy, he's the pedophile guy basically who was also arrested
Yep.
for a
and
bunch of things like
and
that.
and also laundering money into the Trump campaign,
Mhm.
on
Right,
top
that's
of
true.
the
That's true. That's true.
pedophilia. So that's who Dmitriev is, and
There was
he's
one other guy there. There
Putin's.
was actually Jared's best friend or something, like
Yes,
from
so one
frat
of.
school or whatever it was. I don't
Yeah.
know, something that I can't remember the name, but he looked
And
to us like he was
MBZ was there.
yes,
MBZ
NBC
was
was there.
there. Yep. So this meeting happened, and clearly it was a back channel. And the reason I'm giving context as to why it's important now. So then Dmitriev, over the past decade again, came up when he and Kushner during COVID, had some kind of weird arrangement, and Russia sent a plane here, which they didn't know about, but then pretended they knew about it, changed even the presidential readout to include the plane. I have both copies,
Oh, wow,
and I'm like, wow, in real time, not real time, a few hours in between, and they changed presidential readout with Trump and suddenly
wow,
included this eighth plane. It landed JFK. Dmitriev took credit for paying for this. This eighth plane had cleaning gloves, combustible ventilators, because Russia during COVID had a big problem
mm,
that their ventilators kept combusting and setting fires to the hospitals.
right,
Um, and this whole plane was unknown. Clearly, it wasn't to send combustible ventilators, whatever. Recently, we did find out that Trump sent back Putin COVID test when none of
right,
us had.
right,
Americans didn't
and
have.
PPE, right? There was PPE on there as well,
Yeah,
but most,
Americans couldn't get their
yeah,
hands on a COVID test.
yeah,
We're dying like flies,
but Vladimir
and
Putin could,
but he ended up. So maybe that's what the plane was for, to send the COVID test and maybe a sample of the vaccine. Who knows?
yeah,
Um, anyway, so that's the second time Dmitriev came up, and now Dmitriev is, of course, Putin's point man to negotiate in Saudi Arabia with Witkoff, and to basically,
sort out
like I
Ukraine.
call it, yeah, like I call it, a sham plan to try to force Ukraine to surrender. So Dmitriev this week, as Trump is tanking the markets globally, um, quietly arrived into DC, um, allegedly to the White House for meetings with Witkoff, I'm sure with Musk also,
Hmm.
and had his sanctions temporarily lifted to get into the United States. So while on Wednesday everything is, Trump announces this ridiculous list and whatnot, Dmitriev is roaming around at the White House in a meeting. And this is someone who is a war criminal. The reason he was sanctioned by the United States is because the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is the state Russian fund,
Hmm.
is one of the main, you know, vehicles to fund Russia's genocidal war in Ukraine. So
Right.
he got sanctioned for being the head of it, and clearly everyone who's involved in any kind of money, fueling uh, filling Russia's coffers to fight in
Mm.
Ukraine, was sanctioned. So that's it. So he's here, and or
Y-
was here,
I should
and
just
then
underline a little bit, just if you don't mind, just going back to the Seychelles things, because that meeting was very important. At that point in their attempt to try and secure Trump's presidency, they were trying to see how the terms and conditions that could be really negotiated with Putin in Seychelles. And that's what Eric Prince and Dmitriev were actually doing there. They came up with an agreement, which was later passed on to Trump. It turned out to be the basis for the first Trump-Putin phone call when they finally got into power. But I mean, this guy is intimately involved with the collusion, if you want to call it that, but certainly the attempt to install Trump in the 2016 as the president of the United States. Dmitriev is one of the architects of that. So to have him back in the United States, having now also committed these war crimes in Ukraine, is unspeakable. And the fact that this just gets passed on quietly by the White House. I mean, sure, we know that they love Putin. We know that they didn't include the Russians in this list of sanctioned countries, even though they still have $3.5 billion of trade with the United States. But then they allow this guy in to come and negotiate. I mean,
Well, the guy was in the White House when they were doing their chat GPT
it's
and
like a
probably said,
den of
include
spies.
everything minus Russia and Belarus and North
Yeah,
Korea. I mean, he
probably.
was there.
Probably. I mean,
Like,
it's kind of stunning. Was he really there? So
yes,
he and Laura Loomer were in this White House together at the same time.
I don't know if they were together. I think she was there. Yes, I
She
can't
was there
keep
right
track.
after the announcement. So she was the same day, right after the
So
announcement.
maybe it could be the same day. Who knows?
Let's get all the
But
spies together. Why not?
exactly. But
Well,
but he, I mean, it is so disgusting and reprehensible to have this man here.
mm,
And just to give a little background, so not only is he, negotiating the sham plan of Ukraine's surrender
mhm,
with Witkoff, he also, a week ago, gave a statement that while in Saudi Arabia, and by the way, he's a direct pipeline from Russia to Saudi Arabia. He's
right.
the one who moves money between also. I mean, they have many, but he's one of the main people who has a very trusted, close
Mm,
relationship with Saudis.
interesting.
Which is interesting again because maybe that's how Kushner got his $2 billion from the Saudis and how he got involved into this whole Saudi
Wouldn't surprise
sphere.
me. Would not surprise me one bit.
No. So he not only was he here, but about a week ago he made a statement that to Russian press that while he was in Saudi Arabia for these, bullshit negotiations, that he offered Elon Musk a joint venture to Mars. And that Russia and Musk should partner together for a Mars mission and project and whatever.
Aye.
The other thing, a few days ago, he made a statement that Americans are in negotiation with Russians. This is so disgusting and vile. I hope every country sanctions this country. Um, that Americans are in negotiations with Russia for minerals deal. The minerals deal is on Russian territory and illegally occupied territory in Ukraine. This is what they mentioned. So it's not just, that they're negotiating with US on a minerals deal while Trump is trying to extort Ukraine out of minerals, that at the same time they're negotiating on territory that they have illegally stolen in Ukraine that has
They're
minerals.
negotiating the rights away for the mining of the territories they've captured in Ukraine.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous.
That's why I say that this
And
is
so
absolutely
the
disgusting. And I
Americans are
really
doing this, or
hope
the Saudis are doing this.
no
The
Americans.
Americans are negotiating two
No,
sides of this.
Dmitriev said he's in talks
So,
with Trump and his people for a rare earth mineral deal with Russia from
but Trump is
Russian
negotiating that
territories.
with Ukraine, the same territories.
Well,
Negotiate.
exactly. So I think he is. I told you a few weeks ago that I
Wow,
think he's the cutout for Russia to try to extort minerals from Ukraine on
makes
territory
sense.
held by Ukraine, and then maybe for a fee hand it off to Russia, and then for a fee keep it. And at the same time, he is in talks with the Russians on a rare earth mineral deal
This
on
is a
Russian
major. This is
territory
so significant because I mean,
and illegally occupied territory.
well, he can't be negotiating both with both sides for
Well,
the
he
same
is.
territory. I mean, that just seems ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, this needs to be big
It's
news. Everyone needs to
disgusting.
hear. It's a chess game which he's cheating at, and he's pretending to be an impartial negotiator here, more on the side of Ukraine, he claims, but obviously it's not. Obviously not. This whole ceasefire deal is such bullshit. I mean, I look at the every day Russia launches more and more aggressive attacks on Ukraine. They're not
They just
interested.
killed a
Yeah,
few
this
hours
just a
ago.
few
They
hours
killed
ago.
six children, ballistic missile strike, and 19 people died. Six children. You have, I mean, I teared up looking at a
And I
photo
saw that
of,
photo. I know the one you're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah, it's very
yeah, with
difficult.
with the parents with their dead son laying on the street. I
It's
mean, come
horrific.
on.
It's horrific. It to me it gets this humoring of Putin, this game that Putin is playing with the West, like there's actually going to be a ceasefire when there is not going to be a
No,
ceasefire. He's not interested in that. He's just playing a
no.
game. He's like, let me see how long I can keep this going while I get as much as I can, and while I get more
He
out of
just
Putin. It's just disgusting the way he thinks. He's got no integrity at all. He's just continuing as long as he can. And the fact that Trump gives this credence, the fact that there's American journalists that are giving this credence, when
yes.
how many times can you say you've got a deal and there isn't actually a deal, and you can't claim there's a ceasefire and then nothing happens on the battlefield, and then still say there's a ceasefire because we can see that there's still fighting going on. We can see that there's enough reporting.
They're killing people
They're killing.
every day in
It's,
Ukraine.
you're just
And Putin,
abandoning your own allies. You're abandoning your own people in Ukraine, and you're doing this terrible, terrible two-sided thing, a two-faced thing now. That it's just, I just, sorry, but that's how I feel. I feel like they've really got to. The media needs to press him on why the ceasefire has not happened. He promised a deal within 24 hours. Where's the deal? Why haven't you managed to get the deal? Maybe you should have done that before you tanked the tariff to the markets because of tariffs. Maybe you should have done one thing right before you screwed up everything over and over and over again. But the media is so compliant, and I don't understand it. I don't understand this need to give him room, like this need to, let's see if he can correct his previous behavior. Let's see if he can somehow correct himself. He's not going to change. He's not going to
no,
change. Things are going to get
no.
worse, actually. They're not going to get better.
No, he right now is like, Trump 2.0 is the most unhinged version
Mhm.
possible. Anything that, kept him restrained in during the first time, he's shed all the people who kept him restrained, and now is surrounded by yes men. I mean, this is what happened in Russia. I remember when Putin was rising and how, anyone who dared to challenge was removed, and like it was
Talk
literally.
about that a little bit for me, will you? Just 'cause, we weren't familiar with it, but you were there. You were there, and you also had you can remember it from your reporting. But tell us exactly what you're talking about. Show it just so people have an idea that this is really the Putin model.
So when Putin came back, he served overseas in Dresden, East Germany at the time, as KGB, and interestingly enough, recruiting Nazi collaborators to send to West Germany. Then he came back to Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. And eventually got placed into the mayor's office after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There, I mean, frankly, St. Petersburg was a gangster, city. Like it
Right.
was all gangsters running it and whatnot. He was obviously KGB. He had a lot of collaborations with the mafia, the local mafias. You had the St. Petersburg port that was, moving a lot of drugs and weapons and other, contraband through. So, I mean, any place there's a port, you have corruption
Mhm.
in that part of the world. Um,
Yeah, especially St.
so
Petersburg.
he developed very close relationships with his people. And speaking of close relationships, one of his closest childhood friends are the Rodenberg
I
brothers.
saw that this week.
um and the Rodenberg brothers, um as Dmitriev was flying to the United States on Wednesday morning, the Treasury quietly removed one of the Rodenberg brothers' wife
Yeah,
off of
Karina.
sanctions off of her. Yep. So he had them, and he had his crew with a mixture of KGB and criminals and whatnot. And then when he eventually moved over to Moscow, I believe like 96, he went to Moscow, started rising there, took over FSB, which is the security services, then eventually went into Yeltsin's, and then became acting president in 99, orchestrated the apartment building bombings and whatnot to gain presidency and start a second Chechen war um, in order to secure power. It was him and Patrushev who
So
did it.
started a war and also burnt down an apartment building just to get himself
Nah,
into
he didn't burn. He blew up.
blew up. Sorry, yeah.
Him, FSB, and with Patrushev. Because once Putin left and went to Yeltsin, Patrushev, who was head of the National Security Council there, he became head of the FSB, which is Russia's most feared. That's the KGB. After the KGB collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed. The KGB split in two
So
to
I'm going to just slow
FSB
you
and
down a little bit here
SVR.
because this is such good stuff. But I want to just talk about in order to secure power after he was elected, he commits a crime of terror against his own people
Before he was
before
elected.
before.
So he was installed as acting because
Mhm.
Yeltsin was pushed aside.
Right.
Um, he was, I mean, if you saw him at the time, like it was the most
I remember. Yeah.
unremarkable figure possible. He,
Mhm.
like, it was more exciting to watch paint dry on a wall.
Yeah.
But security services needed to get him in. So him and Patrushev, um, organized basically a scheme where they blew up apartment buildings. And it was FSB officers who planted the explosive in several buildings. It was a week of that. 318 Russians were murdered. And this, as a result, gave him a pretext. I mean, it was like his 9/11 at the time, because
Mhm.
it's like, oh my God, look, we're under a terrorist attack. It's the Chechens who did it. I'm going to respond. And suddenly, because everyone's rallying around a leader, after these terrorist attacks that are organized by him, after everyone was rallying around this leader, he then launches the second Chechen war, which he obliterated. What you saw in Syria and Ukraine
Yeah.
is the Grozny playbook. And he then secured and won the presidency.
So this is a man who.
Interestingly,
Sorry. Go ahead.
interesting one to finish one
Yeah. Yeah.
point.
No
The
problem.
person who was involved and knew all the details was Alexander Litvinenko.
Hmm.
He managed to escape Russia after Putin took power. A month it took him. Actually, I know who got him out of Russia, and a month it took him to get to London. He was cooperating with British security services and Italian, and then he was poisoned by polonium, by the famous Luga boy. So the person who had evidence and information on Putin and Patricia blowing up these buildings in order to secure power is he ended up being killed with polonium on British soil.
So that is incredible that you've told us that whole history. And I know there's a connection with Litvinenko with you, but we'll get there in a bit. I just want to this just to show people this is what Putin did to gain power, and to think about the mindset that you have to be in to order your FSB to blow up an apartment building, kill 330 of your
Many
citizens.
apartment buildings. I
Yeah,
believe it was
yeah,
four.
it was a good series of them, and then you kill your own citizens and then use that to gain some sort of notoriety in terms of like your strength, which I guess matters so much over there. And then you launch a war on top of that, which is devastating. A war which went on for a long time, right? I mean, that was a ugly,
It was disgusting. Like I said,
yeah, it was
they left
awful.
nothing in Grozny.
Yeah,
Nothing,
it's a base
nothing.
like
There
a
wasn't
genocide.
even.
It's a
It
genocide,
was.
and
Hmm.
then so this is what he did just to gain power, and he
Yeah.
colludes with his own insiders and his own corrupt officials in order to. I will let
Yep.
her finish. I'm just pausing to make these points. I just think it's so important that people understand that this is the same playbook that Trump is using in different ways, in slightly more adjusted ways. But this is the mindset that these dictators, this is how they step into power. This is how they gain power and consolidate power through these terrible events that they commit against their own
Yep.
citizens. And this
Yep.
is the same mindset that can tank
Yep.
a stock market and can, because you decided to put in tariffs.
Yep.
Um, so
And
you
then
keep, yeah, yeah.
he gets into power, obviously, I mean, in the Soviet Union slash Russia was much more simpler because the system is just corrupt. I mean, it's a rotten to the core system. But once he got into power, he removed all the people and all the agencies, all the institutions, the core, everything, cleaned house little by little, and he installed all his loyalists. Exactly what Trump is doing here. If you look at the Department of Justice, every single person who makes it, is significant is now a Trump loyalist. No
Mhm.
experience, nothing, as long as they say yes to him. This is what Putin did with everything, and from everything from the courts to the whole judiciary, um, to the banks, the central bank, everything. Everything is his people, chosen by him. Few times he had to kill them off. you know, he made a wrong mistake and ended up having to kill them off or arrest them. But every single thing in Russia is his people who he can rely on, who will do what he says. And this is how
because
the
he's
whole
made them so
system.
rich. He's made them so rich, and the oligarchs as well. I mean, he got rid of Yeltsin's oligarchs and replaced them with his
Hmm.
own oligarchs,
Yep.
and that's how you just mentioned the name of the Karina Rodenberg and her husband Arcadia. Was
Boris.
it Arcadia and Boris? I think the two of them.
Boris. Yep.
Yeah, these two are very successfully rich now in Russia, but they were his childhood friends. So he reaches into his childhood to create these people. He gives them power beyond their wildest dreams, and they're beholden to him for the rest of his life. His bodyguard does the same thing, and
Yeah, yes and no, because the
yeah,
Soviet system was the same way.
yeah,
The way you went to a good school or were accepted into a position or anything is by context. If you knew the people, so it's not just he did it,
you're
this
right.
is
It's
how the
connections.
system operated. And if you happen to be from this village and this person happens to go to Moscow and become someone, they'll pull you and that's it. So everything, there's nothing, not in the Soviet Union, not in Russia, based on merit, zero merit. Everything is who you know. And this, like I said, Dmitriev actually grew up in the United States. He, interestingly enough, was sent here as a kid, grew up, studied here, went back to Russia, and he would have been just another person
Yeah.
had he not married his wife, who went to school and is very close with Putin's daughter.
And
Yeah, you know?
it's the same thing we're seeing with Trump. I mean, you looked at his appointment of his suggestion for the Joint Chief of Staff. He's some guy he met a few years ago. When he was I don't remember what the circumstances were, but they've met a few years ago. This chance meeting with this guy suddenly, reason for him to be on the Joint Chief of Staff or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it's in replacing a really successful general. But this kind of like it's only the people you know, and only the people you know who've been close to you that get into these positions of power, and you
And who show
degrade power.
fealty.
Yeah, yeah,
Fealty.
right.
They have to be ultra loyal. They have to be ready. If you say behead this person right now, like they can't even flinch. They take a sword and behead you, and that's it. It has to be very, very loyal and ready to follow and break all. Ready to follow all orders,
So this is
even if
very
it breaks
similar.
the law.
It's very similar to what you're seeing with Trump. I mean, it's
Hmm.
the same kind of thing. We're seeing the same kind of build up to the same kind of dictatorship.
Yep, yep.
Wow.
I mean, Trump put a interim DC Attorney General, Ed
Mm,
Martin. The guy, first of all, he's never been an attorney general. He was a lawyer for January 6th rioters and insurrectionists.
mm,
He's been there a few months and causing headaches for everyone.
mm.
Luckily, hasn't had enough power yet, but he's causing headaches for people. He's like threatening and sending letters to Democrats because they said something and now they're under investigation. If you criticize Elon Musk, automatically you're going to be under investigation. He publicly is tweeting these things.
So
You
U.S.
are now
attorney,
under. I
crazy.
mean, this is the DC district attorney right now. He needs to be appointed, but right now he's acting interim. But this is what he's doing. This is what Trump wants. Someone who will go on Twitter and monitor free speech and say, "Oh, you look like someone you just criticized thy leader. I'm opening an investigation against you." And he was sending letters to congressional people for making comments. Like one said, we need to bring knives to a bar fight or something like that.
Yeah,
That Dems need to get a spine to
yeah.
push back, and he saw this as reasons for an investigation and sent official. He
That's
sent
crazy. And he's a very
and
well
he
known
and
figure in the right
Vindman.
wing. Yeah, sorry.
He opened an investigation against not Alexander, his brother Eugene
Yeah,
Vindman.
crazy. I mean, this is
Yeah,
insane that they're going after these people when there's so much to go after in the world. There's so much crime, there's so much corruption, but these are the people they choose to. And on the
yep.
other hand, they're letting in people like Dmitriev and the Rodenbergs back into the country. I mean, it's just the world turned upside down, as I keep saying. And it's what you're saying is as a witness to what happened with Putin. It's the same thing that is happening now with Trump. This is the same
I warned
playbook.
about this in 2016. I was
Yeah,
screaming like a lunatic, told that I'm being hyperbolic. It's just then we had guardrails, thank God, the Boltons. And
mm.
I mean, I find myself agreeing with Bolton now.
That's
And I'm
crazy.
like, what is happening to me? Like, what am I, God? What world
I
am I in?
know. The other day
But
he said something about Witkoff, and he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah. What do you mean? I'm agreeing with you."
I know. I see him on, and he's like so passionately
Yeah.
screaming at Witkoff and Trump, and I'm like, my God, how am I like in agreement with Bolton? But it was the Boltons and the Kellys, and even that corrupt with Tillerson, and all these people who did not want to cross the line. Like they
Yeah.
wanted the corruption, they wanted maybe to do something, but they would not cross certain lines. This is all gone now.
And now you've also been targeted by the Kremlin, right? I mean, you've on a few occasions, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping into something you don't want to talk about. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But can you talk about that a little bit about what that looks like to be a commentator and a journalist and an influencer like you are, and then to be targeted by the government?
Yeah, I mean, I clearly have rubbed them in all the worst ways, and I've been monitored for a long time. But it happened a year ago, interestingly enough. I got someone who happened to just see. So what happened is there was a pilot, a Russian pilot who defected to Ukraine. He defected, flew the plane, and it was a very famous case. And then Ukrainians gave him a new identity. He went to Spain. He was assassinated in broad daylight by the Russians in Spain. They somehow managed to find out that he was there, his name, everything,
Hmm.
and he was assassinated. So there were a few very odd articles talking about his assassination. And mind you, I didn't even ever even mention his assassination, but they basically said, "Oh, that his assassination, his murder, has revealed all the traitors." And I look, and my name is on this list of traitors. So I'm like, "What the heck is going on?" Two articles, one by Konstantin Malofeyev's Rag Tsargrad, and another one by this weird thing. So I take a look, and I'm like, "What is going on?" And the person who uh, murdered Litvinenko with the polonium, he had posted my name on his Telegram with a handful of other names that basically were a list of traitors, and and that he's sick to death and whatever. And
That's terrifying.
he's been making statements that basically all the traders, he's constantly saying it over the past year, that all the traders are going to disappear like dogs. They're either going to overdose or, be found dead from alcohol or just disappear. And that's that. So then I started looking, and apparently this FSB front did an investigation, and they I think it was my work with the Syrians that triggered them. I think that's what it was. But yeah, it was I mean, obviously I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right to piss them off. But
That is terrifying, though. I mean, that's not a kind of thing you want to be ever, and it's just an attempt, of course, to muzzle you, to suppress you, to make you scared, to make you not do the work that you're doing, which is so extraordinary. And we see it. This is in dictatorial, authoritarian
it's not the
states all the
first time
time.
though,
Yeah.
because a few years ago, I had made comments about something with Russia, and during the day, I walk into my driveway, and I'm in a very quiet neighborhood, to get my son, and someone smashed the back window of my car completely, like
Oh my God.
shredded in pieces. So it's not the first. I constantly get these messages. This one, though, to fall on his radar, like yuck. Like,
You don't want to be on his
fine
radar. You don't want to
phono.
be, I mean, it's just a testament to your work, as you point out, and it's such brave work that you do. And it's also a very, very serious reminder for people right now about what this administration is going to be like, because this is the same school, the same playbook we're seeing. Give them enough time to cement their power over the United States, and they'll be doing this to everybody in the United States as well. And that's almost guaranteed. He's guaranteed.
And just to add, in I believe what was it, 2020, with the George Floyd protest, in Portland, they were disappearing people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I was documenting it and screaming, "This is a Russian tactic." Vans with unmarked vans with
Mm-hmm.
people with no insignia coming up, grabbing protesters, no paperwork, no nothing. Now they're disappearing green card holders and visa holders. I mean, this is the same tactics. And like I said, Trump, his first term, he wanted to shoot the protesters. It was the
Oh
likes
yeah.
of the Joint Chiefs. What's his name?
Millie was there, wasn't it?
Millie.
Yeah,
Yeah, Millie and others who said no, you cannot shoot the use the military to shoot protesters.
yeah,
But the instinct has always been there, and I spotted that instinct because he had that raw type of thuggish behavior and patterns of a Putin who's like, oh, this person's giving me a headache, make it disappear, like a mafia type
yeah. He's a mobster.
thug.
He's a
Yeah, thug
mobster.
mentality.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's always been there. We just had guardrails and had
yeah.
people protecting.
And it's going to get worse now. We're going to have lots of opportunities to talk again in the future about your stories, and thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to move on to the number one story because it's relevant to all of this. It is relevant to all of this, and it ties in so well with what you're saying. Because into the White House on Tuesday walks Laura Loomer, who is he's the mistress. She is the mistress of Donald Trump. They had a relationship very clearly during the elections. There's lots of
By
photos of
pictures,
them
it looks like it. I
that
mean,
looks
gross.
very, very
Ugh.
intimate and whatever. And the president can sleep with whoever he wants, in my opinion, except when that mistress walks into the White House with a hit list to take out 10 of the senior National Security Council officials in the White House. 10, by the way, it's now it comes up to 10. And then also takes out the head of the NSA, who's a four-star general, and gets his deputy moved to another department. This is no longer what are they calling her? A conspiracy theorist or I don't know what they've termed her as. She's not an influencer, all these other things. This
He's
is
an
a
extremist. He's a conspiracy theorist extremist, 9/11, denier and conspiracy theorist that it
who's
was
getting a
inside.
lot of inside
He,
information from
yes,
somebody who's getting fed a
yeah.
lot of information about who the top 10 people at the NSC are and who the head of the NSA is and why and then dossiers full of information that she gives to the president. This is no longer to me like just a mistress or an influencer. This is an operative. I don't know whether she's self-operating or whether someone is getting her to operate. But when someone walks into the White House, gets 30-minute access with the President of the United States, and he's then able to wipe out the entire National Security Council leadership and the head of the NSA, this is not just a visit from an extremist. This is a visit from an extremist getting orders and direction and information from somewhere else. And it would not surprise me if that came from either the Russians or the Chinese or whomever they are, is feeding her this information, because who else benefits from this? I'll tell you why I think it is the Russians, is because that same group of NSC people were so connected to the Ukrainians. This is Biden's people as well that were kept in there because they had such good relations with the generals on the ground in Ukraine. They built it up over the years. They knew to give them what they needed. And that relationship was so important to continuing that Trump actually agreed to let them stay in. And that is why I think it's the Russians that sent in Laura Loomer. I think they sent her in to say, you know what, these people are facilitating and aiding the Ukrainians too much. Let's get rid of them. So maybe it's related to Signalgate. Maybe it's just the separate operation. But it is beyond me that this is happening. I'm old enough to remember Bill Clinton for having a whatever with his intern caused a major impeachment. And this guy, people aren't even questioning the fact that she walked in there and was able to, assassinate basically his entire NSC team. It just floors
That's
me that how far we've gone.
That's the disturbing part. I don't care if he's sleeping with her or not.
Yeah.
That to me, I don't care. But the fact that she is a conspiracy theorist has
Hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with national security, has never worked in
Hmm.
law enforcement or intelligence, nothing. And that she can come in and shake up a national security council, basically disrupting. I mean, this is a disruption to our national
Oh, for
security.
sure. Oh, his entire
The
team.
fact and the fact that she's an extremist, and I mean, she's a vile person. She's a racist, extremist, the worst of the worst. And the fact that, this is who gets the ear of Trump is gross. With the NSA guy, I have my own thoughts because
Hmm.
he was fired after. I think that the Russians asked via Dmitriev are the ones who passed that message because he was fired late last night and his deputy was moved, he was extremely aggressive at countering Russia.
Hmm.
Russia's attacks and cyber attacks and operations, on an NSA level.
And the
And
Chinese, and was responding to Salt
yeah,
Typhoon. So in both cases.
so I personally think, I mean, that Dmitriev just had this Wednesday, you know, rendezvous in the White House, and that the Russians, he definitely would have been one of their top people who, have
Hmm.
successfully thwarted operations of theirs, that they could have passed along this name. I don't, because he's not known. The National Security
Mm.
Council is more known, and anyone with Walt is known, and that. But he was, I mean, you know, doing his thing in the NSA.
Yeah, I mean,
For
then it's a
her
such.
to go there, I don't
Well,
think so. I
I don't know
think
how she
that
would have
this
gotten all
can,
this information from. I mean, to me, the fact that Dmitriev and her were both at the White House in the same day or within 24 hours of each other is also interesting. I mean,
yeah.
it could be that she's operating on their behalf. I don't know, or someone's behalf, but we don't know that. All I'm saying is it's pretty weird for her to walk in with a dossier full of this detailed information about the personnel at the White House in a sea, and that she, as the girlfriend, as the what I know, the honeypot, whatever she was,
I,
like, I mean, how does she get that kind of influence over the president of the United States that he eliminates his entire foreign capability in one shot? Like, I mean, she has a meeting with the vice president and the chief of staff and the head of the your national security advisor. Why? How is this? This
and
is
he said they're castrated
yeah,
as she hands a list over.
yeah,
This one and that one and this one and this one, they're all disloyal. He
yeah.
doesn't even defend his team. This shows you how pathetic these people
But
are.
this is so serious. This. I mean, people might think, oh well, it's just Laura Loomer, whatever, she's a crazy woman. This is a very serious attack on
No,
our
she's
capabilities of
on the
of the United
national.
States. Yeah,
Mhm.
so national security, and it's everyone's national security, and it's just being completely castrated, and it's so problematic. And what makes it even more problematic is that some of the people that were fired were people who worked with the Republican congressmen and senators on in the House Intelligence Committee and the House and the Senate Intelligence Committee, and those people who know how good these people are, who know how loyal these career workers are, the intelligence professionals are, they refuse to back them up today. Only Warner came out today, and he was very very good earlier on, but people, I
He's
shared
a
his clip
Democrat.
online. Yeah, no, but I shared his clip online. At least someone came out, At least someone
Exactly.
came out and said what they needed to say because it's appalling that we can have this attack on our national security the same week after we have this tariff collapse and our stock markets collapse and this endless list of bad news that keeps coming out of this White House and people aren't saying things. So on that front, I hope people, as I keep saying, I've been saying it every day this week. Tomorrow is a big protest day. I hope people are careful, but I hope people, have share their voices with the rest of America and the world, and let's hear what America really thinks of this guy. I mean, he's trashing this country. He really is.
Yeah, and today's Friday. I mean,
Yeah,
we're close to the witching hour.
yeah,
Usually every Friday night there's some kind of purge.
I
Last
know.
Friday night, so who knows who today's gonna be? If he's gonna, at his fundraiser with the Saudis, if he's gonna purge other national security
Yeah,
figures.
I mean, it's just I don't think I've ever encountered a president that could be so easily influenced by people who just happen to show up at the White House in these like insane circumstances, and yet and he just continues. He plays his golf. He launched his $5 million Trump card this week, which is ridiculous as well, and after trashing $6.2 trillion out of the economy, I mean. It's appalling. It's appalling. It's appalling. I want you.
The the only thing I will say, I
Yeah.
mean, because he's doing it anyway, I wish we could have stopped it.
Mm,
But since he's doing it, I am happy he's going at bulldozer speed, because the quicker he trashes, people's livelihoods, the quicker people will wake up, even people who are not politically active. But,
agreed.
once it touches your house, you suddenly panic and like, what the F is going on? So,
Someone's just
and
mentioning on the
that.
chat as well the they not turning up for the soldiers in Lithuania,
Yes,
which I know
yes,
is a story
yes.
you wanted to talk about today. But yeah, I mean it's just appalling. That's just the wrong choices
Yes.
by the president over and over again.
Yes, that was one of our stories.
Hmm.
Is the Lithuanians first when he was asked about it when they were missing. I mean, the Lithuanian services and the government have done so much to spend their resources to help look for
Hmm.
these soldiers, to give them a proper memorial, to do everything. And when he was first asked, and we did this last week, I believe, or we mentioned it. He was asked, he said, I don't know about it. I mean,
Hmm.
you're a fucking president. You know that four of your soldiers are potentially dead. I
Yeah,
mean, like,
crazy.
what are you doing? And then they finally found the bodies, sadly, and pulled up. First it was three, and then the four, and they're arriving in the United States. He's too busy to
Too busy.
greet. He's
You know,
too busy. Can you imagine how disgusting?
and remember
These
how much
people
noise.
sacrificed
Yeah.
their lives for this country.
Mhm.
And this man is too busy golfing. I mean, if I were a Democratic operative, literally, they need to have images of him golfing
Mhm.
alongside a red market, minus 2,000 points, alongside the arrival of these soldiers without a proper homecoming.
Yeah.
And this should be mailed to every single house in this country. Because what he is doing, this is disgraceful. This is beyond disgraceful. To be with the Saudis, to be golfing with the Saudis on behalf of the Live tournament,
Yeah.
while you have soldiers who are dead, four families who have lost their loved ones because they sacrificed their lives for America, and at the same time, everyone who's probably having a drink and a heart attack. Trying to figure out, well, how am I going to retire soon if
Yeah.
my 401k or IRA or whatever is being obliterated?
And the hypocrisy of doing that after you criticized Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, where yeah, soldiers died, and you were so easily blaming them for that, for those deaths of those soldiers, and that very complicated and horrible withdrawal. But still, Biden did what he needed to do, face the music, and respected those soldiers. And here you got four soldiers you don't even know about it when it happened. Well, you say you don't know about it, of course you do, and then you ignore
Maybe he
them.
didn't.
I
Maybe
mean,
when
how?
they were reading him his daily brief, we have four soldiers that could just run right over his head because he doesn't
I think he
care.
chooses what he wants to admit to knowing or doesn't want to
Exactly.
know at any given point. And I think it's one of these things where he's like, I don't want to be associated with four dead Americans. Do we know what happened, by the way? Do we know what?
I think that it was just a tragic accident that their vehicle veered off into the swamp and they were investigating, and then once they got into the swamp it was 16 feet down, and it's very
Uh,
hard to rescue people, in this type of condition.
well, the
Luckily, it
Lithuanians,
was in Russia,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, thank God.
because that would have set off even, more had it been like the Belarusians or Russians kidnapping them. That would have turned it into a real international incident. But I mean, the whole thing is disgraceful. It is beyond disgraceful, and you know, like this needs people need to see this because
Yeah.
this, I mean, he talks about the elite. There's nothing more elite than a man sitting with Saudi foreign money from a kingdom that butchered a journalist into 100 pieces,
Hmm.
and that he welcomes and sports washes and sane washes this whole regime,
Hmm.
and that they are sitting in Florida as the whole country is in panic of
Hmm.
where are we heading. I mean,
Hmm.
like, are we on a cliff, like about to fall off? What is going to happen with the economy? And then on top of it, the disrespect for four men who signed up to sacrifice their lives for America.
Unbelievable. Of course, and the Saudis were the people who they excluded from the sanctions list, from the tariffs list. They excluded the Saudis. Of course, they have all the money in the world. They, of course, could pay some of it. Look, this is horrific, and thank you very much for your passion around that, and thank you for bringing up that story to our viewer, and thank you for your very, very smart and thoughtful words, Olga. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that
Mm.
people are losing their lives, and that you've got a president and their livelihoods and their and their futures and their American dreams. I saw this interview today about this woman who has a small business who says she's watching her American dream disappear in front of her eyes. She's worked at this small company for years, and this thing is evaporating in front of her because she can't deal with all these ridiculous tariffs, and she's screwed. And do you think he cares? Do you think he cares about the
No,
fact that he's taking
no,
away America's dream? Not one little bit. That is not a very
no.
happy note to leave you tonight, but we have to leave you because it is time for us to go. Olga Lautman from the Trump Tyranny Tracker. Everyone needs to subscribe to the Substack. It's the most important read of every day, also of Unmasking Russia. Thank you so much for all the hard work you do. Thank you for sharing your stories with us tonight.
Likewise,
And
likewise.
my pleasure. And thank you for being here every Friday on the FiveStack. And thanks to you, everybody, for watching tonight. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope those of you who are protesting are safe and careful, but please go and protest. It's important your voices are heard. And we'll see you next week on the
Turn
FiveStack.
off your biometrics just in
Turn off your, yeah,
case.
or burner phones, or, don't even, it might be, and go with friends. Go with friends if you can.
Yes, friends, videotape, old-fashioned videotape camera.
Exactly, exactly. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Okay.
Olga. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.